to Jason versus the Moon. In this video, we're going to be going over, one U.S. patent for geoengineering, but there's many patents for it, and I'm going to leave a link to where I'm getting this information. The one we'll be discussing today is US 201-201-17003, and that is Geoengineering Method of Business Using Carbon Counterbalance Credits. This isn't the most exciting one I've ever seen, but I had to do a video on it because it's one of the more recent ones. You can see the publication date is from 2012. But there's a lot of interesting things that are talked about in here, and that's the reason I'm doing this, is because it just mentions too many things to pass it up. And these are things we need to think about. Something I want to mention before we move in a little bit further is I had an epiphany of sorts whenever I was reading through this, and I'm talking about this is not some easy read. I mean, you really can't skip around when you're personally reading it. We're going to in this video, but I'm going to give you the link so you can go and break it down yourself. But there's things that are mentioned in here that made my stomach drop a little bit, and it made me kind of, for the first time, have an epiphany of why our government may not be telling us what they're doing in our skies. Why they have us with our heads down and working like worker ants all the time and always having distractions and things. Because a happy, docile person or community or just general public, is not going to cause a lot of issues, and they're not going to go off the edge very often. Yeah, you got some that do for sure, but they generally just live a dull, monotonous life and stuff. And where the epiphany hit was, I started to read some of this and realized, like, holy shit, like, I don't know if I want to tell my wife this because it might make her start to freak out. And she doesn't even really believe in this stuff. Of course it exists because I'm showing you, but she's not one to really to look at it too often. And I, for a few minutes, just sat there and just was in awe of what I was reading and what this thing said, and just kind of realized, is that the same feeling our government has towards us as the public? Are they thinking that if we tell them, that it's probably too late to stop global warming? Is that not going to freak a lot of people out because they're going to be wondering, like, what's going to happen, with the radiation levels and food and I don't know, just everything that the sun can affect. It's a huge thing. Without the sun, nothing lives. So we'll move on to the actual stuff. Feel free to check out all of this in more detail, but let's go ahead and read through just a brief description of what we're going to be looking at. A business method for providing an emissions trading approach value of two products and services that provide active cooling of the earth, that provides a sustainable means for global cooling strategies to achieve commercial value. Making business out of it, of course, in order to drive development and real-world application of these approaches, compromising the steps of manufacturing a light-scattering nanoparticle, deploying the stratospheric nanoparticles for reducing solar radiation incident on the Earth, receiving carbon counterbalance credits in exchange for the local, national, regional, or international benefits derived from said deployment, and derives income from selling credits in order to create sustainable and viable business systems, devices, and agents for deployment in accordance with the business methods are also disclosed. So the few things that I thought were interesting there, of course, was going to be, that they're, trying to make a commercial business out of spraying light scattering nanoparticles in order to reduce solar radiation incident on the Earth. And in exchange for doing that, there's many ways other than that, which you'll see, but you get carbon counterbalance credits, which are basically a type of currency for global cooling strategies. If you're wanting to play the game right, according to this patent, you've got to be playing their game, which is to spend billions of dollars to try to cool the Earth. So let's move on to descriptions. We'll start with the background information. Okay, and we're going to move on to background information. Here's what I was saying in the beginning. This is just kind of a scare tactic. Maybe it's not, but it kind of got my stomach messed up because I read this. It is probably too late to stop global warming through conservation and the use of alternative energy sources. I mean, that hits hard right there to hear that. I know it's just a sentence and it's just words put together, but you're gonna see as we go through this what's going on with this patent and why there's reason for concern in my opinion, unless they're using scare tactics just to gain money, which is also a possibility. Even if all industrialized societies could switch today to net zero greenhouse methods, the Earth will likely inexorably continue to warm for decades, if not for centuries. I mean, um, there you go. So there's a let's see, in order. Yeah, so there's a little bit on that. In order to, well, let's get to highlight a little bit. Um, in order to encourage and promote a rapid reduction in both worldwide carbon production and atmospheric carbon levels, carbon credits have been introduced as a key component of national and international economic and regulatory strategies intended to mitigate and then reverse growth in concentrations of greenhouse gases. This is interesting. There's nothing on here that's not interesting except for maybe the descriptions of the illustrations. I kind of breezed through that and did not take notes. But I would suggest reading everything. I'm just going to go over some of the highlighted points. This is a pretty interesting thing right here. Typically, um, typically, a carbon credit is equal to permission to release 1 ton of carbon. So 1 carbon credit equals permission to release 1 ton of carbon, 2,000 pounds. The idea is to allow market mechanisms to drive industrial and commercial processes in the direction of low emissions or less carbon intensive approaches than are used when there is no cost to emitting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Since greenhouse gas mitigation projects generate credits, this approach can be used to finance carbon reduction schemes between trading partners around the world. And so, I mean, there's some interesting stuff right there. Carbon trading. We'll get a couple more in and then I'll be right back. But let's go to carbon trading. It's just one specific application of an emissions trading approach. However, note neither of the current credits directly counters the actual incident radiant energy coming from the sun to the earth. So yeah, I mean, we know that. I mean, of course, the credits aren't directly doing anything to counteract, what they're trying to fix here. But it is, once again, we're talking about making this a commercial business or have commercial value. We're of course, I mean, this is 2012. I'm sure that this is in the works as we speak because they are spraying all the time. And this explains real well, some of the stuff they could be or they are spraying. And that's it's just crazy to think about. So yeah, I'll be right back, and we'll move on to a little bit more detailed stuff. Okay, let's go over some definitions that they use and stuff. So we have global warming, a general warming trend of the Earth's environment, and let me go ahead and hit this up. And current use specifically refers to the increase in the average global temperature of the Earth's near-surface air and oceans since the mid-20th century due to climate forcing by greenhouse gases, and it includes both a projected continuation into the future without action to control it, as well as a perception of severe consequences for life and civilization on Earth if unchecked. Global cooling, we'll just kind of breeze through these a little bit. An active method for reducing the energy incident on the Earth, its lands, its oceans, or its atmosphere. Geoengineering, an engineering process by which a planet's climate is modified by methods, systems, devices, or agents. geoengineering is usually taken to mean device systems or agent-based engineering approaches to deliberately manipulate the Earth's climate to counteract global warming through changes in the solar radiation incident upon the Earth. Just continue to read that. Terraforming, a process by which a planet's climate and environment is made more inhabitable for earthly creatures. This term is applied to extraterrestrial sites for the transformation of environment hostile to Earth-based life forms. The rest of that we'll skip, except for we'll go to nanomaterial. Materials manufactured and created to have at least one dimension, width, length, diameter, or structured feature less than 100 nanometers in size. Nanomaterials may be a structured rod called a nanorod, a structured tube called nanotube, carbon cage or ball such as a fullerene, a powder with particle size under 100 nanometers called a nanopowder, a crystal called a nanopowder. I feel like they messed up there, and so it made it sound very weird. But you can see that they've got they got some pretty weird, stuff just within what we read there. Let's see, global warming, cooling. So now we're on the last two paragraphs under example 1. Note also that the global temperature rise is reduced, stabilized, or eliminated without any required reduction in greenhouse gases. Such greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, might have other effects if not reduced. Acidification of oceans, for example. However, the global warming temperature effect has been modulated by a reduction in the total energy available for absorption. There are other methods of reducing incident radiation, for example, modifying surfaces, e.g. floating larger mylar reflectors in the sea, white roads and rooftops, and others, as well as space-based methods, addressable individually and remotely, pointable mirrors, mylar sheets, and others, in addition to the stratospheric light scattering methods detailed here. All such methods fall within the present invention if the costs of the projects do not deliver a sellable commercial product, and instead, or in addition to, being paid for using emission credits for incident radiation reduction, such as CCCs, that can be traded for tangible value and property. I mean, it's basically a new type of currency in a sense. Not that you and me are going to be able to use that, as the public, but let's go to example 3. We're just going to read the first 3 paragraphs. First 3. Let's do that. A multinational regulatory body that issues carbon credits may have many reasons for wishing to promote global cooling, including international food supply, integrity, social stability, political stability, altruism towards all people of the world, and others. They make it sound like such a good thing, but we'll get into how this could be potentially dangerous shortly. In this example, the present method of business as it applies to doing business with a regulatory body is discussed. Body A could reasonably be a local, state, federal, multinational, or an international regulatory body. Here, a hypothetical regulatory body that issues carbon credits, called Body A, has expressed an interest in inducing global cooling through the use of geoengineering. I mean, and just so everyone's aware, I mean, you can see just in this example here that no one's up in a plane spraying stuff for free. It's a business. They're being paid to do this. It is their job. It is not just a conspiracy theory, and you'll see once again as we go through this and many other patents throughout this series, we'll get into a lot of things that it's just out there, guys. It's just that no one wants to believe it, because when people don't do the research, they laugh at it because they don't know any better. They don't know, or they deny it. But it's all right here for you. We're not going to read that third one because this goes into examples, and y'all can definitely feel free to read that. We're going to go to this one, and this kind of made me laugh a little bit, and you'll see why. A government, like a regulatory agency, may have many reasons for wishing to promote global cooling, from self-interested preservation of the status quo, which is basically just like keeping up with the Joneses, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if China does it, well, then then Europe's going to do it, and if Europe does it, then Canada's going to do it, and Canada does it, the U.S. is going to do it, or just whatever. So you're going to tell me that it's just self-interested preservation of the status quo? Whatever. We don't. We obviously that's ridiculous. Including food supply integrity and social stability to altruism towards all people of the world. However, unlike a multinational effort, a single government may choose to act alone when other governments cannot make a decision or are unable to reach agreement as a group. Meaning that it looks like that if a government wants to break away and they're like, you know what, 4 out of 5 say that they don't want to spray the skies, and the one says, well, I'll break off and do it on my own. I guess that's what they mean. Obviously it is, because it says may choose to act alone when other governments cannot make a decision. So that's an interesting thing to say. We're going to skip all of 5 and we're going to go on to, basically 6 is going to be, we're going to read the whole thing. And, I'm hoping that whoever is watching this isn't bored. I'm trying to do the hard work for you, which is the sitting through and reading every single word. And picking out what's the most interesting, and kind of giving you the highlights. So, I know it's a lot, but imagine how I feel. Just reading it sometimes out loud is insane. Their paragraphs or their sentences are just so full of information. So we'll move on to example 6. So here you're going to see, under example 6, we've got a lot going on. Optical scattering agent and other devices and agents. In this example, the agent leading to a reduction in received solar energy is considered. So check this out. Some very interesting stuff right here. This is where it really gets exciting, in my opinion. Aerosolized particles are very important to the scattering of visible and near-infrared light. Current normal atmospheric particulate matter represents a mass of 1 to 100 micrograms per cubic meter. At a typical level of 20 micrograms per cubic meter, the visibility in pure air of 340 kilometers would fall to 43 kilometers by addition of the particles. I mean, we're talking about almost 300 kilometers of visibility difference because of these particles. Any visible optical effect, now listen to this, any visible optical effect in the atmosphere is therefore currently dominated by particulate aerosols. And if you've ever looked up at the sun and you've seen like a sun halo with weird clouds, going by that look like cirrus clouds or just real wispy clouds, and then it creates these kind of colors, almost like a rainbow. I feel like that's what they're talking about here. So yeah, any visible optical effect in the atmosphere is therefore currently dominated by particulate aerosols. Aerosolized particulates are also cloud-condensing nuclei and thus are very important for the hydrologic cycle. I looked into that, and it's just the water cycle, that involves a continuous circulation of water in the Earth's atmosphere. So, evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation, and runoff. And an excess of particles from industrialization has resulted in a whitening of the blue sky, a process that would be strengthened by geoengineering approaches contemplated herein. I mean, that is fucking crazy. Excuse my language. I try to stay professional, but just stuff like that, it just brings out the regular old Jason, man, and that's just how it is. Can you believe it? That's insane. Let's go over to the third. So 1, 2. Let's read this. I mean, this is some shit, guys. It really is, because it's it's 2019. I mean, you'd think that this isn't something that's happening right now. Of course it is. I can see it. I have proof. I have observable evidence of this in the skies around me. But let's move on. Other groups have looked at the distribution and lifetime of particulates in the troposphere, in which particles can stay for days to weeks. with an average of 1 to 2 weeks, and of particulates lofted into stratosphere, in which particulates can reside for months to years, with an average time of 1 year for typical aerosols currently present, especially for particles sized under 2 microns. The stratosphere is the primary reservoir of long-term particles after volcanic eruptions, with mass concentrations to 300 times higher after major volcanic eruptions than during periods of volcanic quiescence. Not sure what that word means, and I'm hoping I said that right. I think I did. This sets an upper limit of what is reasonably required to substantially reduce global temperatures at greenhouse levels present during those periods. So, I mean, they're talking about how long the different, I guess I shouldn't say different, but particulates will stay in different parts of the atmosphere. Let's see, the fifth, so that's 4, 5. This is all interesting, so I'm not going to continue saying that prior to it, but let's go with this one. Excuse me. When Teller in 1997 made estimates of cost, he estimated complete counterbalancing would cost approximately 5 to 10 billion US dollars per year. Now that was 97, man, so that's a huge amount of money now. Probably like 4 times as much, I would imagine, maybe something like that. More recently, Wigley calculated the impact of injecting sulfate particles or aerosols every 1 to 4 years into the stratosphere in amounts equal to those lofted by the volcanic eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991, which they're saying is about 10 teragrams of sulfur in total. And Roche et al., which means and others, estimated that the cost estimated to counteract a doubling of greenhouse gases, 1.5 teragrams or of small particulate sulfur per year, to be higher at 25 to 50 billion a year. Given the magnitude of global warming, even these larger costs are tractable, being similar to what the U.S. Federal government spends annually on education, about 60 billion, and significantly less than when the government spends on healthcare, which was around 700 billion in 2008. So this is very interesting because this right here starts to really get to the point where it's like, okay, what are some of the bad effects? Well, let's talk about that. Okay. A major limitation of many of the suggested cooling agents is their toxicities. Sulfur dioxide, responsible for several global cooling events after volcanic activity, produces a mildly acidic rain. Metal halides such as sodium chloride result in salty rain, which can ruin farmland. God, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like one of those things is like there's give and take in all situations. I mean, you can't mess with nature and expect there to not be negative results. And the proof of that is that they're admitting here, let's just read again, a major limitation of many of the suggested cooling agents is their toxicities. Sulfur dioxide, responsible for severe global cooling events after volcanic activity, and it produces mildly acidic rain. I mean, that's insane. Now, sodium chloride resulting in salty rain, which can ruin farmland. That means, why are GMOs and GMO food or modified food, why is that so going on so hardcore? Because I mean, probably all of this is ruining actual farmland, and we can't get real food anymore. They're having to modify it from seed or at that stage, and they're doing things that are not natural to nature. And it's like we're at a point now where there is no turning back. I mean, it's like that one part said, I have it written down here, it's probably too late to stop global warming, and it went on for, using, different types of energy and stuff. We're past that according to this patent. And, what goes up must come down, even if it stays in the stratosphere for, a year or 2 years, Is it not going to come back down into the clouds and then rain on top of all of us? Well, obviously it is, because they talk about mildly acidic rain and they talk about salty rain. Um, what goes into our food, what it is grown with, if pesticides are used or anything like that, we are eating those pesticides once that fruit is harvested from the plant. I mean, so this isn't something to laugh at. It's not something to deny, because it's put out here for you to do the research on. It's just that the media, the mainstream media, they're going to play the bread and circuses. They're going to give you a bunch of distraction, and they're going to give you just 24-hour news. Come on, they're making up most of this stuff, and they're keeping you distracted. You just have to look up, and I found all of this within 15 to 20 minutes of just what I would consider research, just looking for stuff. This is insane to read just this couple of sentences here, or few sentences or whatever. It's just mind-blowing, because different things just start to connect that you wouldn't think connect. Um, why do we in short food supply because there's just too many people, or is it because we're ruining our farmland with acidic and salty rains from aerosol particulates in the sky? And I can't answer the question, or if it's a combination of the two, but I'll tell you what, messing with nature is not, I'm sure, what was intended. And yet here we are, doing that, and we're seeing the negative effects from it. So, something to be worried about. I mean, unfortunately, that's just how it is. So let's move on to the next one. Uh, let's see, that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're gonna read. Let me highlight the next two, because we're gonna read these. An ideal agent would be neutral to the environment. Not cause more harm than good, and even better, would not have adverse effects beyond a light scattering effect. For example, a biodegradable light scattering polymer would provide a reasonable particle size, remain aloft for periods of days to months, and result in sufficient haze. Listen to that. And result in a sufficient haze for an increase in light scattering. When you see the videos I post, and I'm sure, am I the first one you've seen the videos from? If so, great. If not, that's fine. But, a lot of this is happening directly over our sun. I live right outside of San Antonio. I do a lot of work in San Antonio, and I mean, I'm looking up. I'm outside. I'm looking up every once in a while, and I'm catching some wild stuff. So just think about that, and let's read it one last time. And result in a sufficient haze for an increase in light scattering. Haze being the key word here, because whenever you go out, I use the term wispiness. Okay, but yeah, haze does sound a little better, but potato here, it's the same thing. One example of such an agent is polyethylene glycol. Another example is a sugar polymer or cornstarch. Jesus Christ, they want to put the cornstarch in our damn food. You got cornstarch in peanuts. It's peanuts. Why do I need corn or cornstarch? Check it out next time you look at a thing of peanuts. It's got damn cornstarch in a lot of it. It's crazy, but now they're talking about possibly putting that in our sky. It's just strange, whatever. But even ultra-fine sugars have an average micron or size of 60 microns. The manufacturer of some of these agents may tax current biosphere production of the raw materials. However, solar-driven space production would not be subject to these limits. All these people are something else. Agents with a high dielectric field are strong light scatterers. Certain mineral dusts are also plausible agents, such as silicon dioxide dust, which I don't care, just the name alone. I mean, I know what silicon is, or silicone. I don't want that kind of stuff to be in my lungs or in my food. But it goes on to say, which is prevalent in the crust of the earth. Such dust can potentially lead to lung and skin disease. and damage airplane engines, which are typically unfiltered due to the high airflow. Silica is an abundant mineral and could be provided in a form that minimizes respiratory risk. I just I just think it's like one of those types of things is like, you know, I don't know. Is it really worth the risk? I mean, what, I don't know everything because I'm just now delving into this, but it's like, we're talking about lung and skin disease. We're talking about respiratory risk. Well, they're talking about silica, but to try to minimize that. But silica, silicon, just different particles and nanoparticles and sugar and cornstarch. It's just insane. It's like they'll stop at nothing to fill our skies full of stuff. Um, let's go with this. This is we're gonna read the first sentence. Nanoparticles may be ideal candidates for such efforts. One study showed the mean particle size in multiple samples over Athens ranged from 0.18 to 0.242. I'm not sure what that is. Nanopowders with diameters of 5 to 10 nm can be made from metals, oxides, silicates, and salts. It's kind of weird. Let's just read from here. In comparison, sulfate particles have been observed to have a mean radius of about 10 in one study. Some resonant structures can also be tuned to increase or maximize light scattering while retaining nanometer diameters and long lifetimes in the air. Such materials include such nanorods, fullerness, I don't know what that is. I'm either nanocrystals, nanobots, hello, okay, as well as nanocrystalline particles such as fogs or ultrafine nanopowders, which takes us back to where they were talking about, which will things to create sufficient haze for light scattering. Fogs, ultrafine nanopowders, and our skies. What goes up must come down. And so it's just strange. We're going to go to this. We found that the forward transmitted light incident on a sensor could be reduced by 2% with only minimal amounts of scattering particle on the order of micrograms per cubic meter. Among the particles we tested were nanopowders of metal and other oxides, including oxides of silicon, titanium, and aluminum. We'll get into these things eventually, I think, down the line, because I know there's been links to aluminum or aluminum products found in deodorants and things that, from what I hear, and I haven't done the research yet, are supposed to be leading towards Alzheimer's or things like that. But let's move on. Other nanopowders were submicron cornstarch and microscopic 60 sugar and polyethylene glycol. I thought this was funny because it mentioned satellites, which I do not believe exist. And if they did, think about this. When you watch spacewalks on NASA's YouTube channel or any ISS footage where they're outside, or you watch the Tesla getting launched into space, if you believe that kind of thing, you don't see space debris, satellites, whether they be in use or not. You just don't see any type of things orbiting the Earth. And I know that it could be miles below or miles higher, but you would just think, I mean, Jesus Christ, we can see the sun and the moon from space. You're going to tell me that we can't see, thousands of objects that are supposed to be in orbit. But I digress, so let's go into this. The ideal particle size and height of placement in the atmosphere has been considered. In the troposphere, in or below the weather, these agents do not remain long in the atmosphere. Too high. Well, before I move on, let's talk about if they don't remain in the atmosphere for too long a period of time. Does that not mean they have to spray more frequent? I would imagine so. too high, such as geosynchronous orbit, and these agents last decades or longer, but are expensive to place and cannot easily be called back, as well pose risk for space objects such as satellites, which made me laugh. That's just me, but once again, do your own research. I promise if you haven't heard about satellites being fake, do your research. You'll see that they were first thought of by in the 50s. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but there is a sci-fi writer in the 50s who actually invented the thought of satellites before they were actually ever invented in real life. So it goes back to a fantasy-based reality, and now they're telling you that they launched thousands of satellites into space. Ideally, the high stratosphere would allow for affordable deployment with lifetime of months to years. Last, it should be noted that geoengineering is not without passionate detractors. Some skilled in the art are vehemently opposed to even trial geoengineering experience in the environment and believe that it should be avoided at all costs, at least until better modeling and understanding is developed. Such an unpressured and complete period for evaluation may not be possible given the pace of global warming and the difficulty to reverse certain effects such as melting of the polar ice caps or the stalling of the Arctic equatorial thermocline. In our view, geoengineering provides remain a plausible and tractable way to counter global warming and should be included our present arsenal and the carbon credit system. Okay, so that's super interesting, and we'll be right back. Okay, yeah, and you got to expect to have things like that. People, detractors, people who are opposed to what they're doing. Um, uh, Apparently, that is not keeping them from doing it. I have not gotten into the laws of this yet, but apparently, the laws allow it. That's just from what I can tell. Let me see, what else do we have here. The, the preceding descriptions of specific embodiments of the present invention have been presented for purposes of illustration and description only. They are not intended to be exhaustive or to limit the invention to the precise forms disclosed. Thought there was something a little bit more better in there, but let's see. Further variations of the invention will be apparent to one skilled in the art in light of this disclosure, and such variations are intended to fall within the scope of the appended claims and their equivalents. And the claims will definitely get into. So let's just finish this off with the last paragraph, and then you'll see as we move on it gets a little bit, maybe not crazier, but it continues to stay at a pretty crazy pace. We have discovered a method of business, that's the key word here, that allows a global cooling company without a product or service that can be delivered to customers to nonetheless run a sustainable business that obtains sufficient operating capital excuse me, to operate and, if desired, to become profitable. Okay, and that's what this is all about. Probably first about money, of course, since this is talking about business, and second about the fact that we have to continue spraying our skies because apparently volcanoes and industrialization in our nations have caused, too many issues that we just can't get past. The method involves an assignment of a carbon equivalent or other green value to the product or service in the form of a carbon counterbalance credit. We'll just move on a little bit. Okay, so let's go on to this part where it says exemplary systems, devices, and agents for deployment while practicing the business methods are also disclosed. These agents have been tested in the lab or simulated in models. Both the agents and the business method have immediate application to critical and pressing environmental problems, especially to greenhouse gas-driven global warming, and thus constitutes an important advance in the art. That's as far as I took notes. We are going to go over the claims real quick, because as you can see, there's not so much that we can't just go over it. text based on automatic optical, don't care. So let's go with claims. Okay, so claim 1. A business method for providing commercial value to a geoengineering global cooling business of a first party compromising the steps of A. Manufacturing or having manufactured a device or agent designed to reduce the incident energy upon the Earth or incident upon its oceans, land masses, or atmosphere. B. Deploying or having deployed said device or agent, say spraying it in the air. Aerosols, of course. C. Receiving compensation in the form of tradable credit, which would be the CCCs, wherein said credit is issued as compensation by second party to the first party in exchange for reduction in incident energy. And then you have D. Monetizing, making money off of said credit by selling said credit or exchanging for other valuable instruments to the second or to a third party, such instruments including cash, notes, loans, materials, currencies, or other tradable instruments. I mean, it is. So that means they're saying, I mean, the CCCs are basically currency. They are treated as such. Method 2. The method of claim 1, wherein the agent is a light scattering optical material deployed in the atmosphere. Okay? 3. The method of claim 1, wherein the agent is a light scattering polymer. Look up polymer for yourself. I recommend looking up different words. It's nice to know those. I don't want to do that here because it would just take too long. It's already going to be a long video. Number 4, the method of claim 1, wherein the agent is a light scattering nanomaterial, such as nano powder, nano rod, nano crystal, or nanobot. So again, if you've heard nanobots and you're like, dude, come on, that's sci-fi and all that, maybe that's how you feel or whatever. But I mean, it's a real technology, and it's mentioned here. Number 5, the method of claim 1, wherein the agent is a biodegradable material. Well, let's throw that in there because biodegradable. Just kind of like when you're going green. You buy all the cleaning products that don't have harsh chemicals and stuff, and you buy things that were made out of recycled material and whatever. The method of claim 1, wherein the tradable credit is a carbon credit, and we've said this so many times, CCCs, counterbalance, carbon counterbalance credits. 7, the method of claim 6, wherein the carbon credit is a carbon counterbalance credit. A business method, this is 8, a business method for providing commercial value to geoengineering business, comprising the steps of A, the first party manufacturing or have manufacture an optical polymer agent designed to reduce the energy incident upon the Earth or incident upon its oceans, land masses, or atmospheres. So an optical polymer agent, man. I mean, it's there. B, deploying or having deployed said polymer agent. Okay, they got to spray it up there in the atmosphere. There's only one way to get there and spray it. It's going to be airplanes, jets, whatever. C is receiving compensation in the form of emission or other tradable credit, wherein said credit is issued as compensation by second party to said first party in exchange for said reduction. I mean, so that's saying right here that, like I said, they're not up there spraying it and going, haha, take that, you motherfuckers, because their families are down there too, which is real strange. So I guess that these people think they're doing a good thing, but they are receiving compensation. And it's in the form of tradable credit. I mean, that means, like you saw up here, I mean, they mentioned cash, notes, loans. I mean, it's no problem. And then, of course, D is monetizing said credit, so making money off of it. 9 is a business method for sustaining operation of a geoengineering business of a first party comprising the steps of A, determining for a given global cooling agent, system, device, or method the equivalent amount of carbon that would have to be removed from the atmosphere to provide an equivalent effect on global or regional temperature. And the last thing here, B, is providing compensation in the form of tradable credit, wherein said credit is issued as compensation by a second party to the first party in exchange for said equivalent amount of carbon. I'm not, we'll look at the drawings. I'll just literally, okay, well, there's not many at all. These kind of really simplified, which is real strange. It's almost like they're like, listen, guys, it doesn't have to be badass. Just give us some type of illustration, spend a couple of days on it, boom, give it to us. We'll throw it in this patent and good to go. What's in documents? Well, this is usually going to be, and I'm not going to do this on here. I invite you guys to do it. Like I said, I want to be the guy or the person who kind of pushes the door open for information, to kind of get you to think a little bit. And I'm going to give you the link. And this is actually what's going to be is this is going to be an extensive list of patents. Geoengineering Watch is going to be here. You're going to have United States Patents and Trademark Office. So this is all legitimate stuff. The earliest you see is 1891, at least on this list. There are many lists. I have others, but we're going over this one now. You can see I didn't start at the the most recent, but the second to most recent on this list. But there's RFID, environmental manipulation. I want to see if I can find it real quick. There is one, hurricane and tornado control device. There's method for controlling hurricanes. That's what we're going to do next. I've read up on that. So thanks for watching and sticking around. I hope to see you on the next one.